I'm building a 2-trailer tiny house. It's time for a build update. We're going to have a look at the floor that joins the 2 trailers. Now, while there's some flaws in this design, I think you'll be floored with the result. I'm sorry, that joke was beneath me. Okay, seriously, before we get into what I ended up designing, let's step back and have a look why the floor was so complicated. If you don't want a brief overview of why the floor was so complicated design, skip ahead, I'll put the time in the description. So I thought if I could work out swinging walls and a retractable roof that a floor would be simple, right? Turns out not. And there's 3 main reasons why it was so difficult to try and design this floor. So the first problem is the design of the floor so that we can seal it up. So that we can make it weatherproof, we need these swinging walls to come down past the edge of the floor so that we can stop weather coming in. But also, so that we can hide where the floor joins up against the wall, we need the floor to come in underneath the wall so that we don't see the join. Then somehow we need to be able to seal that up so we also stop drafts. Second problem is maneuverability. This floor is 2.4 meters wide and almost 2 meters across. Then it needs to be able to support a couple people standing in the middle of it. So that's a pretty significant structure. By the time we make something strong enough to support that, we put down our floor and then some form of covering, this thing gets pretty heavy. To make it worse, because the walls need to come down on the outside of the floor to protect it from weather, the walls have to be open before we can put the floor in place. So we have to try and maneuver this massive floor somehow into place with the walls already in place. Now, the most obvious answer is to hinge the floor off of one of the trailers, but that became problematic. We could hinge it off of the main trailer here, but because we have our 2 walls that pack back into the front of the trailer, the floor needed to be hinged right back in here, which meant a really complicated hinging system to be able to hinge the floor so that it can meet the level of the trailer and then come back and stand in here. So the obvious alternative was to hinge it off of the side trailer. And I played with this one for quite a bit, but it posed a couple problems. The first problem is the size of the floor. Now, assuming we can get some kind of hinging system working on here so the floor will marry up properly, the thickness of the floor posed a problem. By the time we put a structure in there that can support a span this large, plus flooring, minimum 100 mil thick. That means, so that we can swing our walls around, any floor that we have here hinged up against this wall needs to be recessed enough so that these walls will clear it. That meant cutting into the space in this trailer even more and getting a really big step into the trailer. But it actually posed a more complicated problem, which takes us to our third challenge, the third challenge of alignment. There's 2 main design principles I've been working to and working out how I join these trailers. The first is to build it so it's not going to move. The second is assume it's going to move anyway and build to that. That's why with these swinging walls, I've done solid pins inside nylon bushes and I have clearance down between the walls so the trailers can move a little bit and accommodate for that. When it comes to a floor, that becomes really difficult marrying them up into a seamless floor. On the sides here, I have walls so I can extend the floor underneath the walls and hide any movement gaps. And then on the side trailer here, I also have a wall with a door that goes to the bathroom, the bedroom. So I've got mostly a wall that I can hide any movement gap. But up against the main trailer, where the floor meets the main trailer, I have to have a nice join that's seamless so that I don't see gaps opening up. That's the problem with hinging the floor off of the side trailer here, because it's fixed. And when it's up against this trailer, any slight movement in the trailer, even the slightest movement, is going to translate to a gap in that join, which is the only visible join line that I'm going to have in the floor. So I could spend over an hour walking you through all the different permutations and ideas I've looked at of how to make this floor work, but I think we should focus on what I've actually created. So if you do have questions or ideas about some of the challenges of joining the floor, ask them in the comments below and I'll respond if I can. So let's have a look at the solution. The first part of the problem was supporting the load. I've got almost a 2 meter span and I need to be able to support a couple people standing in the middle of this floor. To build a steel structure strong enough to span that far meant either a lot of depth or a lot of weight. I did look into perhaps making something out of aluminium, which would be nice and strong and much lighter, but I'm not set up to weld aluminium, and let's be honest, I have enough trouble blowing holes in steel, so we didn't go down that path. Instead, looking at the trailers, I realized I've got this drawbar here, which is more than strong enough. So I've made this removable support that sits in the middle of the floor and means I only have a 900 span that I need to support. So the next part is how do I put this floor in place? As hard as I tried to create something that flips, slips, slide, or levitated into place, I just couldn't do it. So that meant moving something by hand. Now, a panel that big I was never going to be able to move. So I've broken it down into 3 smaller panels at 800 mils wide each. This will be 3 self-contained units that have a steel structure, the floor on top, my covering, and insulation underneath. Now, it does mean that I have 2 extra joins in my floor, but these will be parallel and a bit easier to deal with. Even at this size though, by the time I put on a flooring and covering, these things are going to be pretty heavy. And I'm going to be swinging them around inside my house, trying to put them in place. And that's going to be a problem. So I came up with a solution for that as well. So once complete, these panels could weigh in excess of 50 kilos by the time it's got the flooring and the covering on it. I need to be able to maneuver them inside my house, slip them underneath that receiving wall, lower them down into place without losing any fingers, denting the floor or the walls. So I've created a system that will allow me to lower down these panels safely. So the first part of my trick is, once these are finished units, I'm going to put casters on the bottom of these so that I can slide them across the floor of my tiny house. At the opposite end of my tiny house, I'm going to have a void underneath the couch where I can stack these 3 panels for transport. When I want them, I pull them out from underneath the couch, slide them through my house, and then bring them through to the gap here where I'm going to lower them into place. But how I get them across that gap, that's the cool bit. So what I've created is these sliding bars that allow me to slide the floor panel across between the trailers. Easily hooks onto the side trailer with 2 pins, comes over here and meets the main trailer. Using a heavy duty linear actuator, I've created this lifting system that will swing round and lift up these sliding bars to the level of the floor inside. Once it's lifted up, and let's just assume that we've got that at the same level of the floor by the time we put a floor in here, this panel can slide along its casters to where it meets these slide rails. Then the panel can slide down these rails and across over to the second trailer. Then at the other end, we have another problem. The floor is coming in on an angle, and we need to make sure this floor is going to come over the top of this side trailer here, but rest down on it when it gets up against the trailer. So I've created this dog leg in my slide rails with this rail here that lifts up the floor. What happens as this floor slides along, it drops down in and lowers these supports down onto the side trailer. So once in place, we can safely lower the panel down by retracting the sliding bars, and it will gently put the panel into place. Put the floor in place, we just do the same thing for all panels. We put the outside panels in first, and then put our center panel in and lower that down into place last. We don't damage anything and no one loses a finger. Okay, I'll admit, that's only medium level cool, but there's another part to this that I haven't shown you yet. What's really important is that I can keep these panels pulled against the floor of the main trailer so I can keep that gap nice and tight. What I've built into the lifting arm is the ability to hook on springs that will pull the panels together and into the main trailer. Let's check this out. So once I have the 2 side panels in, I can get down in, hook on these springs with a carabiner onto my side panels, slide over my center panel, hook that one on last, and then lower it down, and it pulls all the panels in and locks them in one motion. So that's how the floor between the 2 trailers is going to work. Now that was heaps conceptualized, so I'm going to do another video once I have the floor down and these made up into panels so you can see how it actually works as a system. But I wanted to show you at this point so you can see structurally how the floor works and what I had to try and deal with. There was heaps of thought that went into this that I couldn't cover in the video, so if you have thoughts or ideas, comment down below and I'll get to them if I can. This actually marks a milestone in the build, which I'm bloody chuffed about, because these 2 trailers are now structurally joined together. We've got a sliding roof, swinging walls, and a floor. So the 2 trailers are structurally one unit now, which I'm so happy about. But we're not out of the danger zone yet. I still have heaps of work to do to work out how I make this sliding roof work, how I make these swinging walls come around and nest into the side trailer properly, and how I can make that floor work seamlessly when I'm actually putting it into place. But to do that, I have to do it in conjunction with the wall frames and the roof that I build onto the 2 trailers. So the next step is actually to start moving onto wall frames. I've got to insulate the trailers, put down a floor, and then start working out how these frames will work and marry into the rest of the structure that I've got here. We're moving into winter here, and despite a blue sky day, it gets pretty windy and wet here. So I need to think about how I'm going to approach the build, because floors and the wall frames are going to be pretty susceptible to moisture. That might mean videos become fewer and further between, but I want to try and keep building through winter. So in the meantime, I've got heaps of work to do. I've got to make the most of this weather, go build cool stuff, and hopefully I'll see you soon.